A few months ago, Canadians received the greatest gift our nation could ever receive. Justin Trudeau, the Queen of the North, the man who couldn't finish a sentence without saying, the man who told us all that he drinks,
like drink box water bottles sort of thing.
That man finally gave us the one thing we were all asking for.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
After 10 years of destroying Canada, he finally stepped down as Prime Minister, stealing from Canadians one last time on his way out the door with this chair he took from Parliament. And in his place now sits Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, who has called a snap election, giving Canadians 1 month to decide who they will be voting for. Leading the NDPs is a man who stands for nothing, Jagmeet Singh. Leading the Liberals is Mark Carney, the globalist whose head is a bit too big for his body, just saying. Leading the Progressive Conservative Party is Pierre, the man who is only aware of 2 genders. And leading the People's Party of Canada is today's guest, Maxime Bernier. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I know you're on the campaign trail. You're a busy man, so I appreciate you taking the time to, sit down with me.
Oh, and please, I like to do that. It's a nice way for me to answering questions and, being able to speak with more people. So that's an opportunity for me to be with your viewers.
Yeah, exactly. I actually voted for you in the
Oh, thank
2021
you.
election. Yeah, I did. Here in Ontario, it was crazy. I tell this story on my YouTube channel all the time. There was one day I wanted to buy a lint roller from the dollar store and I wasn't allowed. There was the mandates on the jab. There was the mask mandates. There was so much going on. And you were the only political leader at the time who was standing up for us.
Yes.
And so I voted my convictions and I voted for you. When I tell people that I voted for you, there's like one of 2 reactions that I get. Some people who don't know about the People's Party of Canada because it is a new party. And then I do get the criticism, people like me get the criticism that you're splitting the vote, right? And, I voted my convictions, not my fears. So what do you say to people who say that anyone who's like me and wants to vote for Maxime Bernier or who has voted for Maxime Bernier in the past is splitting the vote, is throwing away their vote? What is your response to that?
Yeah, for me, there's no such thing as splitting the vote because, for example, if you have an apple and you split the apple, you'll have 2 pieces of an apple. But for us, our policies are so different than the Conservative Party of Canada or the Liberal Party of Canada. For example, who is splitting the vote? Right now, in this election campaign, that is Pierre Poilievre, because his goal is to have more support in the big GTA, to have more support in Vancouver and Victoria. And that's the only way for him to win the election. So he's going to the left, he's splitting the vote, and that's what he's doing. On the most important issues, you can speak about climate change, you can speak about mass migration, you can speak about the war in Ukraine, you can speak about all the globalist policies of the UN, the World Health Organization. Poilievre and Trudeau are the same, and you can add to that the trade war with President Trump. Poilievre and not Trudeau, Carney. Poilievre and Carney are the same. So we are not splitting any votes, and we believe that the more support we will have, the more influential we will be as a political party. If you like our ideas, and we are the only party that is speaking about these ideas, you must support what you want. The Liberals, yes, I agree with a lot of people. If they are in government, they will drive us into a wall. And if Poilievre is in government, he will do the same, but at a lower speed. The bold reforms that we need to do in this country to save this country are the policies of the People's Party of Canada. And we will support Poilievre when he will be a conservative, and we will shame him when he won't. So we are your insurance policy to keep Poilievre in the right direction. to keep him honest. But I can tell you, we have candidates all across the country ready to fight for Canadians with the same bold ideas. And our time will come, and I hope that it will be at that election.
Many of you who've been watching my channel are aware that my politics leans conservative. However, just because that is where my values align doesn't mean that I only get my news from conservative sources, and that is exactly why I use the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. Ground News is a platform that I trust, and you can check them out by going to ground.news/NCS or by scanning the QR code. And just to give you guys an example of Ground News, check out this story. Canada's old relationship with US is over amid Trump tariffs, Carney. Ground News provides 330 sources for the story, 48% left-leaning, 25% centrist, and 27% right-leaning. And just by comparing the headlines, we can see the difference in reporting. For example, this headline from a left-leaning source. Carney says tariffs force new era for Canada-US ties. Or this right-leaning source. Canada's ready to fight Trump's tariffs, Carney says. The left-leaning source uses language that paints this as a new chapter in Canada-US relations, whereas the right-leaning source paints this as a conflict. Every day, millions of news events happen all around the world, especially in 2025, where it can be very difficult to keep up with the news cycle, and that is exactly why I use my Vantage subscription to create my own custom news feed. I simply go to my interests and select the topics that I want to appear in my feed, such as entertainment, Canadian politics, US politics, tariffs, Maxime Bernier, and more. If there is a specific country, company, or public figure that you're interested in, you can add it to your interest list, and all news related to that topic will appear in your feed. I've been working with Ground News for over a year now because I sincerely see the value in their platform. They're not looking to persuade people's opinions, they simply present you with the information so that you can draw your own conclusions, and I highly recommend you check them out. I'm giving my viewers 40% off this unlimited access plan, which you can access by scanning the QR code on the screen or by going to ground.news/NCS. Subscribing not only supports my work, you're also supporting an independent platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. A special thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Many people, such as myself, have been under the impression that, well, Pierre Poilievre, Maxime Bernier, they essentially stand for the same thing. So why not just vote for Pierre? Can you debunk that? What differentiates you from Pierre Poilievre?
There's only two sexes, and all that woke ideology. He did say that there's two genders, but after that, the journalist did ask him a question. If you apply to have your passport, there's three choices: male, female, and X. Is that mean that you will change that? And he didn't answer the question. He said it is not important. And he is globalist and we are not. He is globalist, the Paris Accord is okay with that. Yes, he won't impose a carbon tax, but he will impose more regulations on businesses. He will give more subsidies on the to the green industry. He will give money to promote a technology, the carbon capture technology, that's billions of dollars to capture CO2. He is for mass immigration. And yes, he said that is for 250,000 foreigners a year. And add to that the temporary foreign workers, add to that the international students, add to that the refugees. All that would be more than 1.5 million foreigners over 3 years. That's a lot. That is mass immigration. Yes, he wants to create more houses like the liberals, but he wants to do that for foreigners. He wants to be able to Canada to be able to build more houses, to be sure to be able to have more foreigners coming to our country. These houses won't help to solve the housing crisis. It won't be for Canadians. That is irresponsible, like the liberals. I can go on, for an hour about that. People have just to read our platform, People's Party of Canada.ca, click on platform. All our 22 policies are there. And at every election, we are promoting the same platform. But Poilievre, at every election, he will go further to the left. So you need the People's Party. If you believe in these ideas, you need us. You need to give us your voice and your vote, and we will be more influential. And like that, we'll be able to push Poilievre in the right direction.
Now, I did look at your Twitter feed. You posted this. I voted C4 sterilized kids jail parents. You did mention that just now. Can you speak more to what this bill C4 is and why you feel it's important that people know that he was in favor of this?
Poilievre doesn't want to have didn't want to have at that time the mainstream media against him, and he voted, and all the conservatives and all the liberals voted for that bill, and that the bill, if you are a parent and you have a child that is suffering from gender dysphoria, you don't have the right to tell your child that he is not born in a wrong body. If you do that as a parent, you can go in jail for 5 years. That bill is promoting the transition of kids. We will repeal that bill, and it will be illegal for a doctor or a nurse to promote the transition of kids. If they're doing that, they will go to jail.
Another post that you shared criticizing Pierre that I would like you to elaborate on for the audience is this one. Pandering Pierre confirms he will continue to defend supply management and is now accusing Carney of secretly wanting to abolish it. What a clown show. And you said, Pierre Poilievre confirms that he will never cancel the controversial dairy supply management. Now, I think a lot of Canadians are completely unaware about the dairy supply management, about the dairy mafia, as you called it. So can you please speak more about this?
Poilievre and Carney have the same position on that. They want to
Yeah.
keep that system. It's a system for dairy, poultry, and eggs, and maple syrup. So what is happening? These Canadian producers can produce only for the Canadian market, and they are fixing the price of these products every year. Who's fixing the price for the milk? It is not the free market. It is not the supply and demand. It is the Dairy Commission. And the Dairy Commission, who's on that Dairy Commission? It is the dairy producers. Every year, they are fixing the price of the dairy. It's like a communist system. And we, Canada, are imposing huge tariff against the import of these products, 300%. And like that, the Americans, for example, cannot export their milk in Canada because they won't be competitive on our market with 300% tariffs. Because of that, we Canadian consumers are paying twice the price if you compare that to prices in the US for these products. It is adding to the inflation. And I said that 10 years ago, that we must abolish that cartel. If we want to have a free trade agreement with Trump, we need to abolish that. President Trump is serious about that. He tweeted on X 3 times that, we must abolish that. It's unfair, and he's right about that.
Why is it that Canada has positioned itself to be so dependent on trade with America?
First, because we don't have a real free trade agreement here in Canada. We created that country in 1867. And the goal to have a country, Canada, was to have an economic union in Canada. That was the colonies. They said we're going to be together. We will, we will be independent, and we will be able to create a country with an economic union. After more than 150 years, we don't have that. We need to abolish the provincial trade barriers that we have in this country. And it's because we don't have a free trade agreement in this country. It is easier for our businesses to export to the US than for a business, for example, in New Brunswick. It's easier to export to the US than to export in Canada to Quebec or Ontario. So we need to have a real free trade agreement. That's part of our proposal. And that's why we are so dependent of the US market.
Now, Donald Trump has been he's been flip-flopping with the tariffs. Canada has, flirted with retaliatory tariffs, and then we had Ford who was saying that we're going to cut off the electricity, and then he rescinded it. What is your opinion with how this whole tariff thing has been managed by the Canadian government? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? What would you do differently about these threats of tariffs that have been coming back and forth from Trump?
I'm not happy with the war the trade war that we are having right now. I'm not happy with the position of the conservatives and the liberals about that, with the counter tariffs. A tariff is a tax. when they said 25% tariff, when Trudeau said that at that time, and Carney and Poilievre was okay with that, they are imposing a new tax on everything, 25% on everything that we are importing from the US. We, Canadian consumers, are paying that, and Canadian businesses are paying that. We are the only national political party that is saying no tariff because we don't want to push that economy into recession. And actually, that is what will happen. And now, this week, Carney said we will impose another counter tariffs on cars coming from the US. And he said at the same time, the cost of that will be $8 billion, and I will give that to the big automobile industry in Canada. What is telling us? What is really telling us? It is telling us that he will tax Canadian consumers, Canadians who want to buy cars, and it will take from their pocket $8 billion and take that money and give that as a subsidies to big corporation. That's taxing the poor to giving that to the rich. That's what Carney said, and Poilievre was okay with that. So that's why we must not have these counter tariffs. That's why we must have a stronger economy and being sure that our businesses will be able to export to the US, will be more competitive. And the only way to do that is to cut their taxes, cut the capital gains tax, cut regulation for them to have more profit, to be more profitable, to be more competitive, and for them to keep jobs here in Canada. And just on the corporate income tax in Canada, the federal and provincial income tax together, it's 26% on corporation. In the US, it's 24%. And Trump said that he will lower that. So our businesses won't be competitive. That will be an argument for them to go in the US and produce in the US. If we want to keep our businesses here, we need to be sure that they will be competitive. Our proposal is to balance the budget in 1 year by cutting 50 billion dollars and having a surplus. And all the surplus at the second year will go to lower taxes to corporations with a flat tax of 15% and lower taxes to Canadian consumers and abolishing the capital gains tax. That's a way to have a more productive economy, and that's a way to be competitive for our businesses to be competitive in the US.
I'm really dumbfounded as of what's happening lately. So, the Liberals have spent the last 10 years destroying Canada. Rent is unaffordable, housing is unaffordable, crime has been rising. And when you look at graphs, they go like this for housing, for crime, for everything. It's been a sharp uptick in everything. And apparently, the polling data suggests that the Liberals are favored to win this next election. So I want to ask you, why do you think that despite the last 10 years, there's still anyone in Canada who is willing to cast a vote for the Liberals? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a big question. I hope I can have the answer. I want Canadians to understand. I'm not doing politics to try to appeal to your emotions, but that's what Carney is doing. Remember, during COVID-19, the liberals and the conservative were using fear and propaganda to change our behavior, to be sure that Canadians will take that shot that was not safe and not effective. They are doing politics by using emotion to try to change your behavior. We are not. We are doing politics based on ideas, and we need to appeal to your intelligence. That's the People's Party. Now, with that that trade war against Trump, they're saying Trump is a danger for us. The 51st state, we are independent. Everybody must hate Trump's. And the media, now the new narrative from the mainstream media, Trump is bad and we need to save Canada against Trump. And now they're using emotions to have votes, and the liberals are very, very good at it. And now the population has been manipulated, like during COVID, about that emotion that our country is in danger and we must do all that. So it's sad, but this is the reality in Canada. The mainstream media are able to influence the population, and the mainstream media is pushing Carney.
One thing that I will say that I think Mark Carney is very disingenuous, and to your point, like the mainstream media does favor him. I saw that they're talking about, oh, Mark Carney got rid of the carbon tax, and I think that that's not true. It's they're being they're playing semantics. He lowered it to 0%, but
Yeah.
it is still there.
Yeah.
So after the election, if he wanted to bring it back, he could. Um,
Yes.
what
Yeah.
are some of Mark Carney's policy positions that you most strongly disagree with?
But the globalist policies, he is the globalist in chief. Carney was the special envoy for climate action and finance. That was Carney. And now he's telling us that he does not believe in everything that he said before, the book that he wrote before. I cannot trust him. You're right when you said in your question that he destroyed our country. He did it. Actually, you're right. Crimes are, at the roof. Inflation is at the roof. Immigration at the roof, and our standard of living is going down. Our purchasing power is going down. You cannot afford to buy a house in Canada right now, so it's a disaster. But Poilievre, having the same policies on these big issues, he will be a better manager of a big fat government, and but he won't solve the big problems that we have because Poilievre is pandering to every ethnic communities across the country every
Yeah.
weekend with a new costume. He won't stop the mass immigration. The population is growing faster than the economy, so the GDP is growing, but the GDP per capita is going down. So we are poor. And that is because of mass immigration. But Poilievre and Carney are okay with that. So both of them will destroy the country at a different speed.
So what are your plans? I know Justin Trudeau, when he was in office, he was able to create this illusion of GDP growth, as you said, with immigration. Your plan is to put a moratorium on immigration. What is your plan to grow the economy, to grow GDP?
Balancing the budget, cutting the spending. When the government, has a deficit, we are paying for that. The deficit of today is the taxes of tomorrow or the inflation of tomorrow. We are paying now the inflation tax. We have an inflation about 5% in Canada, not 2%. We are paying that inflation tax because of the big spending that we did during the COVID hysteria, the big deficit. So our plan is to for having a more productive economy, cutting the spending, balancing the budget in 1 year. The deficit of this year will be $50 billion, and we can balance the budget by cutting corporate welfare. We're going to save $25 billion. Cutting foreign aid, we're going to save $10 billion. I'm at 35 billions. Cutting the equalization formula, instead of giving $26 billion in that formula for poor provinces, cutting by half, we're going to save $13 billion. And also cutting CBC and Radio-Canada and all the money that we are giving to mainstream media, we will save $2 billion. We can easily cut the budget and having a surplus the second year. And with the surplus, we will give that to Canadians. All the surplus will be back in your pockets. We believe that we have the best vision for the future of this country. And if our platform is not adopted in Canada, I don't see any future for this country.
Yeah, that's my fear. I'm actually very fearful what could happen if the Liberals win the next election. Now, you mentioned separatist movements, and I wanted to just play this clip. I've spoken about this on my YouTube channel before. None of the leaders have addressed this issue, and it's the issue of the Khalistani movement. There's people in the audience chanting Khalistan, and they say nothing about it. This is the clip.
That one of Canada's greatest strengths is its diversity. We are strong not in spite of our differences, but because of our differences.
We will rely on the great Sikh values that Guru Gobind Singh brought forward, values of equality.
There was a clip that happened in the suburbs somewhere here in Canada where there was a group of Khalistanis who were saying, this is our country, Canada is our country. Now go back to Europe, you're from Europe, this is our country.
This is our country. We are owner of Canada. We are proud Canadian. Khalistan, this is our country. You are from Europe. We are owner of this country. Go back to Europe. Go back to England.
What is your thoughts on this, on none of the political leaders addressing the growing Khalistani movement? Because this is a terrorist group that's here in Canada that just seems to be going unaddressed and ignored.
Absolutely. That is another proof of what I said. All these leaders, Poilievre, Trudeau, and now Carney, are pandering. They are pandering to them. And that's why they're for mass immigration. They want more of these people here in Canada. And, they are bringing their internal conflicts, the conflicts in their country of origin on our street. I don't want that. They are not integrated into our society. They don't share our values. And, they must be deported. When you don't respect our values, when you are speaking for violence in our country, we cannot tolerate that as a country, but we are. And because now you have weak leaders who are afraid to speak for Canadians, they're afraid of these groups all across the country. It's the same thing when you have too many people in a short time. They are living in ghettos, and we have ghettos here in Canada across the country. We need to end that. That's why we need to have that moratorium, not for 1 year or 2 years, until we'll be able to integrate these people, part in our country, and manage all the challenges that mass immigration has caused in our country. It's a shame that these leaders pandering a costume to a group that is not, welcome into our country.
There's people who make the criticism that when you say things like this, they accuse you of pandering to bigots, to people who are racist. What is your response to people who make that accusation?
I'm not, for me, if you look at what I said in politics, the last one, since, I've been elected in 2006, I'm for Canadians. If you're a black, white, or brown, it's not important for me. And actually, if you're, from Chinese origin from China, I won't call you a Chinese Canadians. Or, if you're coming from Pakistan, I won't call you a Pakistanis Canadians. I will call you a Canadian. I don't pander to your race. I don't pander to your ethnicity. I don't pander to religion. And I don't do politics in a church. I don't do politics in a temple. I don't do politics in a synagogue. No, I won't do. I'm not doing that.
Are you taking shots? Are you taking shots backstage? Are you talking about when Pierre Poilievre was in the building?
Yeah, that's why they're pandering. So if they're telling me that I'm pandering, I'm not. For me, I'm looking at you as a Canadian, and that's what I want. And I don't care about the color of your skin, of your religions, and that must be the case. That must be the case for every leader in Canada, but that is not. They're doing politics in temple, they're doing politics in synagogue. I won't do that. And you won't see me wearing a costume. And actually...
You're not going to do the dance? You're not going to do the Indian dance?
No. So that's our country right now with these politicians. And add to that, the Multiculturalism Act, we are telling them, keep your culture, keep your values, don't integrate into our society. Multiculturalism has failed here in Canada, in Germany, in UK, in Europe, in France. We must abolish that law. We must repeal that Multiculturalism Act, and we must promote our culture, our identity, and no more multiculturalism in Canada. And I'm the only leader who's saying that.
So what would you like to see in place of the the multiculturalism slogan. What would you like to see in place of that?
I want the federal government to spend money to promote our identity, to promote our culture, to promote our history as a country. Not, giving money, for example, to the Chinese community to promote the Chinese New Year. I don't have anything against that. If they want to do that, use your own money. But the federal government must not promote that. So that's what I want.
I have to ask you this question. I don't want to get you in trouble with your Quebecois people, but I saw your interview on TBD and you said you're not a fan of Celine Dion's music. What is that about?
Yeah.
Is that allowed? You're from Quebec. I thought you had to like her music if you're from Quebec.
No, she's a great artist, but I'm not a fan. And actually, I and actually, when I said that, you're right about that, because my wife said, "Oh, Maxime, you won't have a lot of support in Quebec by saying that." I said,
Yeah.
I'm like that, and if you don't like it, and if it's so important for you that you don't want to vote for me, too bad for me.
Well, you're being consistent. You are being ideologically consistent. Another question that I would like to ask you, there's a lot of people who are not in agreement with how Israel is handling the conflict in Gaza. And I'd just like to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, people want us to take position. Is the People's Party is for pro-Israel? Is the People's Party is pro-Palestine? No, the People's Party is pro-Canada. I'm not pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Palestine. And we don't want to be part of that conflict. We cannot do anything. We don't have any influence in Middle East. The only country that can solve that is the U.S. So for me, I'm not taking any position. I'm anti-war and I'm for peace. I'm for peace in Ukraine, and I said we must not participate in that war in Ukraine. And at that time, and I'm still doing that, it was a mistake to send money to Ukraine.
So you would immediately stop funding to the well, you said that you wouldn't fund foreign conflicts if you were the leader.
We won't. We will cut foreign aid. The only foreign aid will go to if there's a humanitarian disaster somewhere or, environmental disaster. Yes, Canada is there and we will help, but we will cut foreign aid, and we don't want to participate in any war. Actually, look, the war in Afghanistan, our soldiers who died in Afghanistan, they died for nothing. Sorry for me. Sorry for that. But now you still have the Taliban in charge of the country. That was not our war. And I'm not pleased with Harper when he decided to go and participate in that war. Like the war in Iraq, when Chrétien said to the US, we won't participate there, it is not our war, that was the best decision. This country is for peace, peacekeeping, and so that's the position of our People's Party. And it's a little bit bizarre these days that, to be for peace, it's to be a right-wing politicians.
Yeah.
Usually peace
it used to be the opposite.
Yeah, usually it was the leftists, peace and love. Now the leftists are for wars, and we, from the right, we are for peace. But that's the position of the People's Party.
Yeah, it's crazy times we're living in. If you could deliver one message directly to every Canadian voter in this next election, what would that message be?
Please go and vote first. There's 40% of the population who didn't vote at the last election. We have a democracy. Go there and vote first. Second, I will ask you to vote in line with your values. That's the most important. Vote for what you want. You'll have more chances to have what you want.
What is your hope for your plan for the People's Party of Canada in the next 5 years, the next 10 years? What would you like to see happen with your party?
I like that you said the next 5 years and 10 years, because you're right. We are there for the long term. We will always promote the same ideas like we did since the creation of this party in 2018. So the next election is in a couple of days. And after that, we'll have an election if you have a majority government in 2029. I can tell you that the People's Party will be there, because what we are doing, it's a revolution. You cannot have that quiet revolution in one election or two elections. And we are living in a parliamentary system. It's a little bit more difficult for a new young populist party to be elected. But look what Nigel Farage did in UK. He was able with 15% of the vote to have 6 candidates elected. And now in the polls, he is at 25%. So, if we double our score or maybe we can do more, I don't know. But this election will be a good one for us. I'm pretty sure that, will be the big, the big surprise of the election. And this party will grow step by step. But our time will come sooner than some people think.
Now, I would like to ask this question. I actually asked, I told my viewers that I was going to be interviewing you, and I asked them to submit some questions. And something that I saw come up that someone asked me to ask you, and I've seen it on social media, is people they made the criticism of you that you are a populist, but you spend a lot of time in Florida. What is your response? What is your response to that?
For that's not true. Our opponent cannot challenge us on ideas. They have to try to discredit me personally with lies, and that's a lie. My wife did bought a house in Florida, and it's for an investment. We were there during Christmas for 7 days, and I'm in Canada. I have a house in Quebec, and I'm living in Canada. And my wife has the right to invest in the U.S. and for renting that house. So that being said, when they're saying that, it's because they don't want to have a discussion about our ideas because they know that we will win the argument. They are throwing lies, and if you look at what I'm doing, and I'm traveling across the country. You can look at my Twitter account and my videos. I'm in Canada, and I decided to stay in Canada during COVID-19 to fight for Canadians, and I will do that. And with all our candidates across the country, we are fighting for you to regain our country, and I'll be in that fight until we win the battle of ideas.
Another question that was asked by my viewers was, would you penalize schools, immigration consultants, and other businesses who game the system to bring immigrants over to Canada under false pretenses?
Absolutely. It will be illegal. And, we will also deport all these illegals, fake students that are here in Canada and don't want, after their diploma, to go back to their country of origin. When you're an international student, you have a permit to study. And after that, you are leaving the country. But they don't want to do that, and we will deport them.
Now I saw that clip that went viral of you having the conversation with the international student.
Now you can stay, but when they're going to be expired,
we will see at that moment.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, if some of you have their permit that are expired,
nobody standing here is illegal. They have their permits.
But in your group of 100 people,
nobody is expired. If they would have been expired, they would have been deported.
Okay, but they will be deported when it be expired.
This is why. No, they won't be deported.
You just said that when it's going to be expired, they will be deported.
They will be legalizing their stay. No deportation will be needed in that moment.
But we will need deportation.
That's why you need to have full knowledge. You are a leader. I think you should have a full knowledge before you get here.
I have a full knowledge. I'm saying when the permit is expired, you must be deported.
You're saying my permit is expired. It isn't.
No, if it's not, but it will be in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months.
I can extend it.
But I hope they won't, because we don't need
they
you.
Will.
No, we don't need you here in this country.
How can you decide it?
Because,
for example,
there's Canadians, there's young Canadians that can work at Tim Hortons.
Then they can. I'm not working.
It's very frustrating. I know a lot of young people are unable to get entry-level positions because those jobs are being taken by international students, because these jobs are being subsidized by the government. So the international students are getting all those entry-level jobs. So it's very unfair. And I think it's disingenuous when people will make the criticism that if you have an issue with immigration, it's because you're racist. No, there are economic reasons that people have have to say, well, no, we need to slow down immigration. The people need to leave because there's not enough jobs for the people who are here. And we're bringing in all these people and they're working low skilled jobs. They're not even entering fields where we like building houses or, things of that nature. They're taking the low skilled jobs that are entry level jobs that should be going to the young people who are trying to build a future here in Canada.
You're right about that. But just think about that. In the beginning, an international student didn't have the right to work in Canada because you're supposed to come here with money coming from your parents. It's more expensive, and they usually they were giving you money to pay for your scholarity, to pay also for your food, to pay for your for everything. And now the Trudeau government and Poilievre agrees with that, and he said, "Oh, we will give you the right to work." No, international student didn't have the right to work before, and that must be like that. So that's our proposal. We will cut international students because now it is a kind of a way to fund universities. That must not be that. We will cut international students, fewer international students. They won't have the right to work. If they want to be an international students, they will have to show that they have the money to study and to stay in Canada during the time that they're studying. So now, because we gave them the right to work, young Canadians cannot find jobs, and that's unfair. By doing that, it is immoral. You are putting the interests of foreigners, young foreigners, before the interest of young Canadians.
Yeah. I did an exchange program while I was in university. I went to university here in Ontario. I did a 4-month exchange program where I was in Hungary studying for 4 months. I wasn't allowed to work when I was there. I wasn't allowed to work. And I used to work for a major bank here in Canada. And at the beginning of my microphone. At the beginning of each semester, the students would come in to open bank accounts because most of them were from India. They would have a $10,000 GIC from India because this is the money that they are supposed to live off of for the semester. And they would come with their ID, and they all had work permits, and they had a temporary social insurance number, and they were applied for credit cards. These are students who are coming here with the intent on staying.
Yeah.
As soon as they got here, the intent was to stay. It was not to study. This was to stay. And day after day after day, I would open accounts for these international students who had everything necessary to stay. They were planning on staying. They were building a life here in Canada. Why are we giving temporary social insurance numbers to people who are just supposed to be studying and going back home?
Yeah, absolutely. And when they're doing that, they are not respecting our legislation. If they don't want to leave after their permit is not enforced anymore. But you have Poilievre and Carney who are telling them, you don't respect our legislation. You are supposed to leave the country. You don't want to do that, but it's okay. We'll give you a nice gift. We'll give you the permanent residency. When they're doing that, they're sending a big signal to everybody. You can come to Canada by using the back door and you'll be able to be a permanent resident. No, if you want to be a permanent resident, you must apply in your country, in our embassy, and doing everything there. Now, for Poilievre and for Carney, it's okay. You cheated, you didn't respect our legislation, and yes, we will give you the permanent residency. It's wrong. We won't do that. We will deport them.
As far as the whole back and forth with Trump, I heard you say that you don't think he's serious about wanting Canada to be the 51st state. I actually think he's serious. How come you don't take him serious?
Because he cannot do anything about that. If you have time to read his book, The Art of a Deal, that's the way he's dealing with us right now. He tried to discredit his opponents, and he did that with Governor Trudeau, with the 51st state, and he's having fun with that. They want to invade our country. What he's serious about is to bring back businesses in the U.S.
What are your thoughts on Trump's recent Liberation Day tariffs that he put on all of the countries?
Yeah, he's doing that. He's doing that to bring back the manufacturing sector in the U.S. That's a step. but the most important is the value of the US dollar. The US dollar is very strong, and because of that, it's very difficult for American businesses to export their products in other markets because their products are very expensive. But because of the US dollar is strong, it's very cheap for them to buy goods from other countries. If you want to solve the trade deficit, you need to solve the challenge of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. That must change. And I believe that the big portrait, Trump understands that the big portrait. And, that first step, I don't know when he said that it will be other countries that will pay for this tariff, actually he's lying to Americans. It will be Americans that will pay that. So that being said, I believe that he understands that we need to have a monetary reset, a new monetary, order in global monetary order with a kind of a gold standard, because the strongest the US dollar is, the more difficult it is for the US to build their manufacturing sector. They won't be competitive. And that is a trend for the last 50 years. And the good news is the BRIC countries are de-dollarizing. They are not using as much as they were the US dollar for international trades. That is helping the U.S. administration for having, a dollar that won't be that strong. So the challenge for the U.S. is a fundamental challenge of the fact that the U.S. is the world's reserve currency for the last 50 years. And the way to solve that is to have a new monetary order. And because he's having these tariffs against all these countries, I think what he's telling them, come back at the table. We need to have a new deal. And I think it may happen. That's the only solution for the US.
People did point out, though, that some of the countries, like I think was the McDonald Island, one of the places that he put tariffs on, people don't even live there. It's penguin. So I feel like you're very optimistic. I like that you're optimistic that he has. There's some sense to what
No,
he's
I
doing.
agree
I'm
with
not as
you.
convinced.
I agree with you. It was a big show, but for me, that was a big message to other countries. Things need to change. We cannot have this trade deficit for years in the US. And guys, I'm putting this tariff like that. If you don't like it, let's come at the table and try to have a new monetary order. I think that's the end goal.
Do you think that this was the best way to go about bringing manufacturing jobs back to America?
I think on the short term, it can be effective, but I don't believe these tariffs will be there for too long, because that will create inflation in the US. And Trump did fight against inflation during the presidential campaign. So that's a message that he's sending. But, like he said, I will impose tariff. I want it only for a month. So that is there for now, is sending a message. And maybe in 5 months, it won't be there if there's negotiation for a new monetary order.
For you to qualify for debates, is it just you just need like one seat? I'm not familiar with how the rules work for you to qualify for the debates, because I know the mainstream media likes to ignore you, and the goal is to get the People's Party Canada more visible. So what needs to happen?
Yeah, but the Leaders Debate Commission, I don't trust them. They're just there to be sure that the People's Party won't participate in the national debates. They want to exclude us. They had a criteria at the last election, and I was supposed to participate. That criteria was for us to have 4% of the vote in the previous election, and we had 5% in the previous elections. And I was supposed to participate in the debate this election, but they created 2 new criteria, and we won't participate. That's sad, because without us, it won't be a real debate. And what they're doing right now, they're censoring 840,000 people who voted for us at the last election, and they're censoring a different point of view on all the most important issues for this country. I did try to fight with them, but it's a corrupt organization on our side. And who is at the head of that organization, on the board of that organization? Former conservative MPs. So they don't want us to challenge Poilievre, and they created that new rule. And at the next election, they will create a new rules. That's why I'm on the ground speaking with Canadians, doing podcasts like you, try to be visible with more Canadians. And I appreciate the time that you gave me. That's a nice opportunity to speak about the platform, and people will be able to choose. And if they like what I'm saying, I hope that they will support us.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for meeting with me. I appreciate you. We went over time, and I appreciate you sticking around to talk to me. I really hope that this interview gets more Canadians aware of the People's Party, aware of your platform. It's unfortunate that the mainstream media is, basically shadow banning you. But
Yeah.
there's podcasts like mine. I've seen you've gone on a lot of American podcasts. People are becoming more aware of you, and I'd like to see more turnout in the next election for the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you. That's my goal also. But I can tell people, be strong, be free, fight for your values. And, if you like the People's Party, I hope that you support us. Thank you again. See you another time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.